Rita. Hi, Chris. I was looking at an old Incom newsletter from 1985 and noticed that their computers back then had a strange keyboard. Where a normal keyboard would have its nav cluster and arrow keys, they had a raised area with an array of tiny, almost pin-like keys. It turns out that this keyboard was actually designed and patented by the Church of Scientology. Did you ever use one of these? And if so, could you explain how it worked? Do you have any idea why the church would spend resources on such an odd project as creating its own keyboard? This is a great question. I love questions about real deep minutia about Scientology like this. This is good, and because it allows me to elaborate, of course, a little bit about the whole thing. But first, to directly answer your question, here is a picture from the link you sent me, Rita, of the keyboard in question, and you can see between the keys and the number keys, there is a pad there of those raised little prongs or pins, and the way that keyboard works is those are the function keys, and function keys, I actually went and looked up, have been around almost, from going back to the 60s, but not really the way we understand them on the keyboard now. They've gone to all different kinds of places on the keyboard, different programmable function keys, which are not just, the letter S or the letter A or something like that, but they are a key that you can program to carry out a series of functions or actions. Save a file, open a file, do various things, print a document. You can set those into the function keys and program them. So in Scientology, they created this special keyboard because the idea was that they would have a cardboard or a little laminated template with holes punched in it that you could lay over that section of the keyboard where the function keys were, those pins, and the pins would hold the card in place, and the card would have written on it what the function of those keys were for the application or program you were running at that time. So if you were running the finance payroll program, then you'd pull out the template for that set of functions that you're running on that program. And if you are going over into this other statistics area of the program, you have a different template that you put over those function keys. And that tells you what the keys are going to do for that program or software. So each program had its own set of function keys, basically, and the keyboard reflected that. And so Scientology got clever and decided, some bright bulb decided to patent their keyboard. And this was going to be the system that they were going to use. And this was back in the early 1980s, back when the personal computers and keyboards and things like that were still fresh and new to people. I mean, the idea of having a computer in your house was a very, very strange idea in 1980. I was there, right? A lot of you guys were too. And it was a brand new thing. And so Scientology was thinking, well, if they, Hubbard, one of the things Hubbard said, and I believe it was around this time period, it was in relation to music and his composing and coming up with special sound effects using natural sounds. And programming them into an electronic keyboard. He was also kind of trying to be on the bleeding edge of music technology and development. And he said, quote, "I don't follow trends, I make them." Yeah, L. Ron Hubbard said that, right? A little delusional. He never really made anything trend, but he was thinking along those lines that, recording natural sounds, programming them into a keyboard, making music with that was this really revolutionary idea. And probably in the late 70s and 80s, there were artists who were coming up with interesting electronic sounds and programming keyboards and all that. Well, same with this on the programming side of things. Let me give you a little insight. Since I don't know that I've talked about this before. I've talked about Income. And Income, I should have said at the beginning, Income is the International Network of Computer Organized Management. And that's a Scientology acronym. And I actually, I looked this up on Tony's blog, this chug thing, okay? So, why would L. Ron Hubbard or why would the Sea Org or Scientology think they were onto something special? Well, see, in the late 70s and early 80s, where computers were really starting to become a thing that people talked about. There were, it wasn't just these mainframes that existed on campuses or at IBM's headquarters and stuff. It was now the idea of microcomputers, because the microprocessor of the, had been invented in the 70s, and the microcomputer, and the old TRS-80s, the Apple Shacks, and the Commodore 64s, and the Apple I and Apple II. I mean, these are the old original personal computers, and so these were just being introduced into homes and stuff like that. And so my point is that people were becoming more and more aware of electronics and what electronics could do for them in their day-to-day life. This was just the beginning of the cusp of that. Within a few years, we would have the Macs and the Commodore 64s and the IBM PCs, and every home would start having these things, and people would start getting used to this, and then Windows would come out, and these operating systems would start to grow. And by the end of the 1980s, this was just a common, normal thing. But at the beginning, it wasn't. This was new and revolutionary, and Hubbard wanted to be on the bleeding edge of this. He believed that his knowledge and experience from the distant past would serve to keep Scientology on the cutting edge of the technological revolution. And one of the issues that he wrote is super confidential. I didn't find out about this at all until after I left Scientology. This is a really high-level confidential issue where Hubbard talks about the Duke of Chugg. And he uses the Duke of Chugg as an example of what a planetary control system would look like, a computer system that actually controlled a planet. Hubbard started asserting at this time, when he created this INCOM division of Scientology, this computer division, he told them about the Duke of Chugg. And the actual issue has not leaked out of the church, but here's a summary of it from put together on Tony's blog, The Underground Bunker, by Jeffrey Augustine. And I'm reading from it directly here, when he says, Hubbard said that the Duke of Chugg was a secret criminal with hidden evil purposes. The Duke had raised income taxes to obscene levels. But even with higher taxes, societal conditions were getting worse and not better. The planet was on the verge of a massive and bloody revolution. But then the computer system, impervious as it was to weak-headed human emotions, performed a dispassionate analysis and discovered that the Duke of Chugg was embezzling gigantic sums of tax money. Acting with speed, precision, and ruthless ethics, the computer system ordered the Duke of Chugg executed. Peace, harmony, and financial sanity returned, and the planet was saved from ruin. L. Ron Hubbard wanted this same type of ruthless computer management system for the Church of Scientology. This computer system would not be influenced by any human emotional reaction, as Hubbard called it. In his Chugg Advices, Hubbard ordered Scientology's computer unit, INCOM, to devise such a system. All true. This is not just from Jeffrey Augustine. Other people who have come out of Scientology, who were in the Sea Org, who worked at INCOM, this is where we get this information from. And this is 100% Hubbard. I could totally see Hubbard telling this story. So this idea that a computer system could run according to L. Ron Hubbard's management system, his policies, and specifically, if you guys remember from my Basics of Scientology series and podcasts that I've done in the past, I've talked about a thing called the data series, which was Hubbard's system of logic and reason. And if you think about L. Ron Hubbard, you don't necessarily think about logic and reason right away. These are not things that you think of in the same sentence. And Hubbard came up with his own system, and it's called the data series. And he expected that that system of logic and figuring out and investigating things and figuring out what's wrong with something, he wanted that programmed into a computer system. And INCOM has not been able to do that from that day forward because it's a crazy, stupid, illogical system that relies completely on the human emotion and reaction that L. Ron Hubbard claims he is divorcing his logic system from. You see, it's completely nonsensical, and you can check out my other videos about the data series if you want to know more about that. But that's how he wanted his computer systems going, and how he expected these computers to run the orgs. And he actually expected at some point that humans would almost be taken out of the equation entirely, and it would just be the computers running things. So that's kind of interesting, kind of scary, very, very authoritarian, of course, all kinds of chances for abuse with this. But in terms of practical terms, in Scientology, what this really did was generate just forests of paper and paperwork. Because they built systems that demanded that they have a lot of data fed into them. And this required all the staff from all the orgs every week to fill out these computerized report forms and send them on up. And all of that stuff was printed out and scanned into these computer systems so that it would have the raw data on which to do its analysis. And this goes on week after week after week. And they've accumulated probably terabytes of data at this point from all these staff member reports, but they don't know what to do with it. You know, how do you manage Scientology with this? Well, good luck, right? So that's kind of the situation there. But I thought I'd give a little bit more background to that than just the keyboard question, because I thought it was a good opportunity. So there you go.